That's why we're going live here and we're having fun. So, hey, welcome everyone to Entrepreneur Encounters. I appreciate you coming. I'm Brent Halfwasson. I'm an entrepreneur, coach, and business catalyst. And my goal is to help people grow their businesses and achieve the profitability that they want. You put in a lot of hard work. I think you ought to keep your money. So, the format that we do here, we do some long form interviews with entrepreneurs who are a little bit farther along the road than some of the rest of us. But I think it's so important that we learn from their experience, we learn from their journey, what they're able to share, and to see that it takes a lot of little steps. And I hope that you can get one or two or even three things out of this conversation I'm going to have with Brian Dondlinger. And you're going to find out what it's going to take if you want to get into a business that's got an aspect of retail, a little aspect of manufacturing, you're dealing with logistics. It is a tough time to be in that market. I met Brian just over a year ago. And I think you'll see as he tells his journey, what he's been able to accomplish in the year since we met, and even as he worked up to this, was really quite spectacular. So I do want to stay tuned as we're going to get into some more on that with Brian. Thanks for joining us for episode 14. It's awesome we made it here. If you have not heard all of our other episodes, they are archived up on YouTube, or you can find them on LinkedIn under my posts. But before we get into that, October 26th at 8 a.m., would love to see you at 4 Founders Stories from Struggle to Success. One of the keys that we're looking at here when we get into understanding how to get forward in business is we really have to understand the stories from other folks. So we've already interviewed Denise Thomas, Sharon Kevel, Chad Johnson, and Jaime Nanez. You can catch their stories in full by going back to some of the previous episodes. But here they're going to share specifically some of the keys, some of the tools, some of the help, some of the network they needed in order to get the support. So do take a click of that QR code, or if you want to look us up, bit.ly/4 and founders. So bit.ly/4 founders. Do sign up. We look forward to seeing you there. We'll be live at On the Bayou Restaurant or streamed via both Zoom and LinkedIn. So without further ado, Brian, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, Brent, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Hey, why don't we dive right in? Tell me about yourself and tell me about your business.
Oh, thanks, Brent. So first of all, we founded this business, and when I say we, it's really my wife and I. And we both have a lifelong passion for vehicles and also a long career. We both have long careers in product development. In particular, I've not only as my career been vehicles, so is my passion and my hobbies. So, I worked for over 20 years in automotive engineering, but I had my own race team for about 12 years. So designed, built, and raced cars. And just, I love motorcycles as well, and cars and trucks and getting outdoors, and just really have a passion around vehicles. And so when it came time for us to decide what to do, we'd want to start our own business for a really long time. It was kind of a natural fit for us to continue in that vehicle realm. So we looked at it and we said, what kind of business can we do around vehicles? And we said, we don't really want to be necessarily a race shop or a service business. We want to be a manufacturer, right? We have a lot of passion around product development as well, and we want to design and manufacture and bring these to market, and we want to make them in volume to keep the cost down, so they can be more affordable to our customers. So we looked around and we said, what are the good opportunities to combine our passions into a business? And we said, well, we love vehicles. And we love getting outdoors, and we love camping. We've had a number of vans and trucks along the way too. And we said, let's look at camper vans. It seems like a good opportunity to combine our passion and bring a new product to market. And we kind of took a clean sheet at this, and we think we kind of came up with some innovative solutions. So talk about that a little bit later, but really just have a passion for all things that drive you, if you will. So.
Well, I think that's cool. So how did you translate that passion into becoming an entrepreneur? Why did you and your wife, who's your co-founder, Heidi, decide to launch into this as a business?
Well, we both had long careers, but we also really love to create. And so we've created some great products along the way, but we really wanted to create our own business, right? And we've had good experiences, but we said, we really want to create something that's really our own. I love creating in a lot of different ways, and it was just kind of a natural extension to not only create products, but to create a company to go with that. So, we've actually been planning this for quite a long time. When I finally cleaned out my desk at my old job, I realized that I had, training materials on being an entrepreneur from like 2002. So it's been a passion of ours for a long time, and we really had our heart set on it. And we kind of thought about a couple different ideas along the way, but none of them quite seemed right. And then the time came here and we just said, this is something we can really get behind because we have a lot of passion for it, which is really kind of one of the keys to carry you through the struggles and the dark times. So we said, all right, this is going to be it. So
Awesome.
we took the leap.
You said the time came. Tell us about that journey. How did you get up to that time moment, and how did you know that the time had come? What were some of those indicators for you in your business?
Well, some of the indicators for me, I think in my career, I was kind of, I don't want to say, I was always kind of looking for opportunities to learn, and I'd kind of gotten to a place where I realized that I had learned as much as I could within the roles that I was in. And I thought, if I really wanted to get that next level of learning, I'd have to go start my own business. So, that's kind of what motivated us. Did that answer the question? I'm not quite sure.
Hey, it's your journey, so I can't tell you it was right or wrong. But what we want to know is kind of what makes the flow, and how did you get confirmed on the inside to know that, like, this is it, it's right now, we're going to launch in and get it done?
Well, it was actually some of the training along the way. So we had that passion, but we were kind of the mindset that you need to have that great idea, that $1 million idea to quit the job and then go take a risk on something like that. And it was actually part of the training that I was in that said, it's less about the idea and more about the person running the idea, if you will. And the phrase was, it's more about the jockey than the horse. And I think when we got that training, we thought about it and we said, we have all this experience, we have all this passion. We really think we could do it. I mean, we think we've got a good idea, but maybe we shouldn't just fully hang our hat on that idea. I think that's another thing that I've picked up through the coaching along the way here is that your idea is going to evolve along the way, right? So you may jump here, but being an entrepreneur is kind of not only having that vision downfield of where you want to go, but also the sideways vision of, what's maybe an adjacent opportunity that might make you want to pivot along the way. So I think getting that training that, was really just more about, the person and their drive and their ability to deliver than that perfect idea. And so once we had that realization, we said, okay, we've got a passion, let's go for it. So, and then we'll kind of figure it out as we go. So I think that's kind of what it was, is just changing our mindset a little bit that, we have the skills, we have the abilities, we've trained for this for a long time, and we think we can make a go of it. So we did.
Well, I love that you touched on entrepreneurial mindset. You have to be in the right mindset if you're gonna have the courage, right, to dive in. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is the type of choices you need to make. Obviously, you were shifting out of a full-time role to be able to devote time and energy on this. Walk through the type of choices and the type of, and I do frame them up as choices. Sometimes we get the choices handed to us, but I think in your situation, you were making some deliberate choices based on thought and timing and passion to come together. So just tell us a few of the choices you needed in order to get in where you're at today.
Okay. Well, one of the big choices and one of the things that had delayed us for a long time was, when to go, when to quit. And I'd been working on an idea for quite a while, kind of in my spare time, if you will. Like I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they say, okay, get as far as you can while you still have the day job before you make that leap. And I was doing that as much as I could, but the day job commanded a lot of time, both during the day and also at night. And what I found is I could probably only get in, 4 hours a week on the idea. We've got family as well, and had to still do all the things in your life, if you will. And then, working on the business was extra. And one of the choices we talked about it, and we said, what's really getting in the way is just time, right? And so if one of us quits our job, then we can really, you can put 10 times more effort into it, 15 times more effort, and get a lot farther, a lot faster. So I think that was one of the difficult choices that, it was time to go. And that meant then also going down one income in the family. And so some of the other choices are, okay, what are we going to adjust in our family life to make that work? So, shifting some of the responsibility, shifting some of the funding around, if you will, tightening our belts for a period of time to make sure that we could make a go at this and that we wouldn't more or less put ourselves in a cash flow crunch. So those were kind of some of the big decisions along the way. And that was really the biggest for me is when do you stay and when do you go? And it had just kind of become time, and we thought we were ready. So that's a long and short answer.
And so you took the big dive into it. I love that. How did you identify the problem you wanted to solve? There's most businesses, when they get started, they found a problem they really wanted to solve. You mentioned it as the $1 million idea. How did you find that one for you?
So it was a little bit of a journey, right? So we saw that there was there was a good market opportunity with camper vans and with motorhomes in general. It was a growing segment. And we said, okay, that seems to align with our passions of both vehicles and getting outdoors. And how can we bring those together? It seems like the right thing. We said, but we really need to understand this market a little bit more. We have kind of an innovative mindset. How can we figure that out? So we kind of did what we call act, watch, and do, right? So ask, watch, and do. So we talked to a lot of people, friends of ours, acquaintances. We also threw it out to social groups and just said, hey, who's interested in buying a camper van? What are you looking for? Who has bought a camper van and why did you buy it? What do you like about it? What's your favorite feature? What don't you like about it? And then we also talked to people that bought something else. Okay, so maybe they decided to buy a tow behind trailer instead. They're into camping, but they ended up with a different solution. So we got some good information from that. And then we watched, right? So we went and did a bunch of camping and we watched how people use them. And, we got on the, internet forums and read some trade magazines, stuff like that. And then finally we went and we did. So what I did is I bought a really old beat up cargo van, right? So it had 160,000 miles of FedEx delivery duty and it had been T-boned and totaled, on top of that. And I said, okay, I get this cheap. It's kind of a lean prototype, right? And I'll build it out and we'll just see what happens. And I built it out, combining the information that we knew and kind of built a little bit different take on a camper van. And so to talk through that a little bit more, how does all that research result in a solution, if you will, or a problem to be solved? Well, we heard three things and we identified a fourth thing. So what we heard is you spend a lot of time driving. So it's got to be great to drive. It's got to see a certain number of people. You got to be able to plug in tablets and whatever. It's the second most time you spend in it sleeping, right? So it's got to be a really great sleeping experience. So, 2 full-size beds and thick mattresses and stuff like that. And then you got to be able to relax in it. Once you get to the campsite, you want a kitchenette and you want to cook. And those three things were really kind of things that kind of everybody was doing. There were kind of the obvious problems to solve. But I think the combination of talking to people and observing and doing it ourselves, we realized that there was like a fourth opportunity there, and that campers are really great when you're camping in them, but they're really a dedicated vehicle. And once you're done camping 2-3 weeks out of the year, they're just sitting in your driveway. And they tend to be fairly expensive. So you're paying on them 11 months out of the year, maybe even paying to store them. And that's, maybe not a great experience. And so we said, okay, how can we fix that problem, right? We saw an opportunity that we don't think other people saw. And we said, maybe if we make this van configurable, where it does those first three things really good, but then everything can kind of move out of the way and it becomes a cargo van again, you can use it more, right? It's not just a camper van. It does all those camping things really great, but you push the beds out of the way and the seats out of the way, and suddenly you have this big open space in the back with tracks in the bottom to bolt stuff down, and you can fit a bicycle in there or a motorcycle in there or a kayak, or you could go to Home Depot or you could go to IKEA and you get, flat pack furniture in the back. And suddenly it becomes a vehicle you can use all the time. And suddenly the value of that investment increases, right? It's not just something you use 2-3 weeks a year. It's something that you use all the time. And so kind of using that as inspiration then too, we called our model the Orion 365, as in you can use it every day. And what we find is, we learned a lot from that first prototype, and then we built a show van. And not only do people see it and they get that concept that, okay, you're still delivering what everybody else is doing, but then you've seen another opportunity and increase the value. So not only does that resonate with our customers, it also really resonates with us. I mean, we built this to be a show van, but frankly, we use it all the time too. So, so this is kind of, we did our market research up front, thought about it, delivered, I think, what customers expected, but then also came up with a little bit more in a way to, I think, differentiate ourselves.
Perfect.
So that's kind of how we identified the problem and how we went about solving it.
Cool. So when you're on your way to the trade show, you can actually put all your trade show gear in the truck and
Yep.
then get it actually set up with the camper van then inside and all set
Yep.
up. I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to, you talked specifically around, you talked to a lot of customers. Now, I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm sure one of the suggestions I gave you was go out and talk to customers, because I usually tell everyone that, because it tends to be one of the gaps of like, I have a great idea. And I say, sweet, have you talked to anyone about it? Well, you actually successfully went out and talked to people. And so I'd love if you can share a little bit, what was the process like finding people, deciding what questions to ask and how to incorporate their answers? Because those are three key places where you kind of fall down in that whole customer discovery process.
Yeah, I do remember early on when you were pushing me on that, and I did, the classic engineer thing, which is, wait, no, I just have a perfect solution, right? Why doesn't everybody else see it that way, right? If I build it, they will come. And so, with some encouragement from you, Brent, and also from a number of other people, we took that step. And I think what we found is you don't necessarily need to go out and talk to 200 people or 300 people and do these giant focus groups, right? That each interview we did was very valuable. So, the first one we just went and we talked to somebody that already had a camper van. We said, how do you use it? What do you like? What don't you like? Kind of what are the opportunities? And we only went in with, I want to say, like 2 or 3 questions, maybe a few more than that. But then we just left it free form, right? And so people would talk, then we would continue to investigate as we would go. So, tell me more about this. You say this is your favorite feature. Why is it your favorite feature? How do you use it, right? And so that then, you would get done with an interview like that and you have a bunch of new learnings, and then that would kind of lead to new questions, right? So then you would get to your next interview and you would ask some of those questions in the next interview, and you just chase it and see where it leads, if you will. Personally, I think going in without a huge preconceived notion, I had a rough idea in mind of what we wanted to do, but then, as you go along, you hear things where you're like, oh, that sounds like my idea, or actually, I didn't hear anything about this idea over here, so maybe that's not resonating with people. And you just kind of make course corrections as you go. And I think probably where we're at right now, the third part of that, so is how do you validate that? We went back and talked to those people we interviewed and said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. And so got feedback on our specific solution. But then for a lot of people too, it's not real until you actually see it. So that's why it was important for us to build a show van so that we could go out there and just really show people this is not only what this product is, but does this kind of look like this would meet your need. So we're actually in that process right now that we have it. We're going back kind of a second time and saying, here it is physically, what do you think? So that's kind of been our process along the way. I think I'd mentioned too that, the way we found people just in the front is just asking friends and family, right? Hey, do you know anybody? Do you know anybody in this space that really loves to camp, or is really outdoorsman, or, somebody that is thought about maybe getting a camper van, or do you know anybody that does have one? So we just really reached out to our personal network to find that.
So. Awesome. Do you, you mentioned the adaptation. You started and you had the totaled truck that you figured out how to make your lean prototype. Now behind you right now, you've got your demonstration van. And then, yep. So what other type of adaptations have you had to make along the way?
I think this is, we might talk about this again later too, is we had to shift our business model along the way. So initially, not only did we talk to customers, we studied this industry in a lot of different ways. And one of those was, understanding it's an expensive purchase and how would somebody go about buying one, right? And a lot of people finance them. And we could see that I talked to a number of lenders and they said, well, we give more favorable terms if it's brand new rather than used. And in fact, some RV lenders wouldn't even lend if it wasn't a new one. So we said, okay, well, that's probably something we should do. We should make sure we, build and sell new vehicles. So how do you then go and build a new vehicle when you're just starting a business, right? Like you don't just start on day one and snap to like Ford Motor Company, right? You got to kind of work up to it, if you will. So this was kind of an interesting maybe lesson in persistence. So I started by calling Ford actually and saying, okay, so you've got Ford Fleet Program. How do I get new vehicles directly from you and convert them so I can sell them to end customers as new vehicles? And we talked round and round, and that's not really what we do. You kind of have to be like a dealership, or we're not really sure how that would work. So my next thought was, well, there's probably some regulations around it. So I called the DMV and talked to the DMV in Wisconsin here, and there are not a lot of camper van conversion companies here, so they weren't quite sure how to handle it either. They said, we think you need to be like a Ford dealership. So I was like, okay, we'll make a set of calls there and try and figure out what it would take to be a Ford dealership, which might sound a little bit strange, but we thought, maybe you don't have to be a giant dealership. Maybe you can just be a little dealership that only sells like a couple a year or something like that. The franchising fees weren't terribly expensive, but they required you then to build a big storefront. And it was like, well, no, that's not the right answer either. So let me keep digging. So maybe I can partner with some local dealerships, right? So, just getting started, we're not big enough for Ford corporate, but maybe we can work with some dealerships. And so we started talking with dealerships, and they said, okay, yeah, we're kind of interested in what you're doing. So the way this works is, we have a van, we have on floor plan finance. We don't actually own it. We finance it until we sell it to the customer. And if you just get floor plan finance, then we can probably do something here. So okay, well, that sounds like an opening. Let's figure out how to make that work. And so I said, where do you get this floor plan finance? I've never heard of it before. And they're like, oh, you talk to a bank, right? So, talk to a commercial bank. So I had a commercial bank, and called them up, said, want this kind of floor plan finance. And they weren't really sure what I was talking about, but maybe knew somebody, talked to somebody, got the right person, go through the whole process of applying for financing before realizing that was not, they were giving me basically a line of credit for the business. And I'm like, no, I need this specific dealership finance. And they're like, oh, that's a whole nother division. So we go through that. And really at the end of the day, realize that, to be able to get floor plan finance, take a vehicle on contract, convert it, give back to the dealership and sell it, you need to have like 2 or 3 years worth of sales. So while we really wanted to start out to be a new vehicle dealer, we realized that business model just wasn't going to work for us initially. So we had to get a little bit creative and shift our approach. So where we've landed is what we kind of call affectionately BYOB, or bring your own van. So working with the dealerships that we had talked with, we can match a customer up with a dealership. They can buy a new van and bring it to us, and then we upfit it. So we've had to shift our business model and worked pretty hard and went pretty far down that road before realizing we really had to shift a little bit. So the customer can still buy a vehicle, can still finance it as new, and then they just need to pay for the upfit on our end. And you just get creative and figure out a way to make it work. So that's kind of a really long, long answer to what have you had to adapt? Well, plan A didn't work, right? So we had to go to plan B, and actually in the process, we came up with plan C, D, and E as well. But, those are also options going down the road, but you just got to have some persistence and not take no for an answer, if you will. You just got to keep asking. You also have to be a little bit humble as well and just say, hey, I don't know how this works at all. Can somebody tell me? So this is kind of an area of exploration. So you just got to keep looking until you figure it out. So that was kind of one of the big pivots we made along the way.
Yeah, I would say to me, as I hear that story, I think of two things. One, a lot of businesses are going to encounter regulatory hurdles, and particularly as entrepreneurs, if we're innovating, we're finding a new problem. For us, problems are opportunities. That just means we have another way that we can potentially ease someone else's pain, someone's struggle, or be able to meet their need. But the regulatory framework, and I think you also encountered, this isn't how we normally do business framework. When you go outside the normal business norms, you combine it with regulation, it can be difficult. I think if I were to look at your business model, one of the reasons I said Brian's definitely got to come on the show is because you kept the end goal in mind. I need to put a van in my customer's hands to solve the problem. You were humble enough to let go of this. The solution is I've got to do a new car thing. Oops, well, there's regulation there. Franchise, don't feel like putting up 100,000 square feet under a roof. A lot of hurdles there. But you kept the goal in mind and let go of the how to get to the goal, but kept asking questions until the answer came. So super kudos on that, because that's a spot that derails a lot of folks, or we get hung up on this is the only way to do it, and we get tunnel vision. I think I spoke to someone this morning about, I'm not worried about your blind spots, but I am worried about tunnel vision, because there's lots of stuff I can't see. That's okay, we'll figure it out. But if we're stuck with tunnel vision, there's only one way to do it. I have to buy, I can't rent, I have to be a new car dealer, I can't possibly do the up conversion. That would have really hamstrung your business and made it difficult to start. So kudos there.
Thanks. We have had to pivot in one other way too, and that is that as many people are aware, there's just huge disruption in the supply chain right now. So our original plan too was to just kind of build a van at a time and pay for it a van at a time, if you will. And when we realized that so many of the core components we wanted to use were on 3 to 4 month backlog, we said, okay, we need to pivot. And we decided at that point in time to dedicate some pretty serious resources to purchasing inventory and just stockpiling inventory until we were fully complete with the design and ready to take orders. So we were just ordering lots of parts all over the place wherever we could find them so that we would be ready. So that's another one. Wasn't exactly the plan, but it was a bit of a blind spot, we're referring to. And then you just got to take some actions to mitigate that risk. So.
Well, that's big to be able to dive in. How are you able to stay on top of the industry? Obviously, you've got adjusting supply chain going on. How are you staying on top of that camping van industry? There was clearly a big movement during COVID to figure out like, hey, if the only way I can get out is to go into the national and state parks as long as they were still open, that was a big outing. How did you stay plugged in with folks in an environment where it's difficult to get in front of people?
Well, a couple of different ways. So again, early on, as part of our deep dive, we just said, okay, well, we need to make sure we know this industry in and out. And so signed up for a number of different RV magazines, just so we could kind of watch the trends evolve within the magazines, as well as there is an industry lobbying group that produces some information. So, getting on their newsletter so we can see what's coming from that industry trade group, and then just getting out and doing it again, too, just getting out and camping and just observing how people use it. I think that's probably one of those good skills with engineers is they can sit still and quiet for a long time and just observe a problem, if you will, and then try and think of all the best ways to solve it. So also, social media as well. We've got our social media channel to push information out there, but it also becomes a conversation too, where you say, hey, this is what we can do. This is what we've got going on. And people say, well, what about this? Can you do this? And so you start to get that feedback too indirectly. And so there's all these little pieces of information, these little nuggets that you get from all different areas. And you kind of put those together kind of like a pointillism and create a picture, if you will, of what's going on. And that helps direct you downstream. And, that as well as staying in tune with, just world events in general, right? So you're looking at what's happening right here, but, is there something else bigger in the world that's going to cause things to shift? So you always got to kind of have that, downstream, downfield vision to be looking for problems so that you can react to or adjust before they become something that impacts your business.
Yeah, that makes sense. You you do have to have your eyes down the field while you're working hard on what you're doing. You do kind of have to have your head up and on a swivel a little bit as an entrepreneur and see what's coming, because small business has always got a lot of challenges in this market, but also frankly in every market. So tell me a little bit
Right.
about what did you need for means and resources and funding in order to get going? Because it seems like it could be a highly capital intensive business. Obviously, you're not having to purchase the van itself, so that seems like that's got to help a little bit. But talk about that funding structure and the resources you needed to get launched.
I think that one of the, I would say, just to name it, one of the fears we've had for a long time is just the knowledge that when you start a business, you step away from having a nice stable paycheck, right? You're going to go through a period of time where you don't have it. You're going to spend down resources to the point where you can finally start to turn that around and sell products and recover. And, you try and do that as quickly as you can. But that's one of those things that had made us nervous for many, many years. And so as a reaction to that, or mitigation to that, if you will, we said, this is something we really want to do, and we're going to dedicate money to that, and we're going to save money every year towards this endeavor. So we continued to put money away for probably 5 or 6 years before we finally took the leap to say, we've got a chunk of money. I'm not quite sure what we're going to use it for, what that opportunity is going to be, but I want to be poised when that time comes, so that when I see that opportunity, I'm ready to go for it. So, that was kind of the preparedness of it. There was a bit of a maybe luck or good fortune to it as well. I'd been really serious in forming this business and working towards it, working with coaches and taking classes. And my company announced layoffs, unfortunately, for the company, but I saw an opportunity there. And I went in, we had announced layoffs on a Thursday, and I went into my boss on Friday and said, tell you what, if we can negotiate a little bit here and we can put together a package, I'll actually volunteer. Maybe you were going to let me go anyway. I don't know. But, I said, hey, let's, maybe we can make this a little bit easier. And if I volunteer, because I'm thinking of going anyway, maybe that could save somebody else's job that really wants to be here. So we had the discussion, and, that was accepted. So I had maybe the good fortune, as well as, in addition to having our savings, when the end of my employment came and suddenly now I have all this time, I actually continued to get paid for a while. So that made life a lot easier when it came to funding. And the good news about all that is that, we have not necessarily had to seek outside funding. Actually, we have not had to seek outside funding, which is really great. It might not be your typical story, but I think a lot of people have the perception that, hey, I can just go ask for money and I'll get it. It turns out getting that money takes a long time. And the people that want to give you that money want to, spend time vetting that and making sure that you have the ability to deliver on that idea, which is, I think, totally appropriate. Right. And also to some degree, sometimes they want some degree of control over the business as well, and maybe somewhat appropriate too. But all those things take a lot of time, right? And we really wanted to have some degree of self-determination, if you will. And I think by having that savings, we have the ability to run the company and not necessarily have to seek that outside funding. So so far so good. I think at some point we're going to have to figure out how we want to grow. What's our growth rate, right? So we can fund growth in the company through sales, which is probably one growth rate. But if we want to grow faster, we might need to take on some outside investment. But I think at that point in time, it gets a little bit easier because you have demonstrated results then, and we could maybe have a little more favorable situation. So, probably when it comes to funding, we could kind of see that risk. We decided to take some action, save up some money, prepare ourselves as much as possible to be able to really just determine what we do ourselves and not necessarily have anybody telling us no, which is one of the reasons I wanted my own business. Is just that nobody telling us no. It's really just up to us to make it happen. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you mentioning that piece about you made some choices. Again, we already talked about choice earlier in the show. We've talked about mindset. You've talked about perseverance. I appreciate you hitting on those things because those are important to me as a mindset facilitator. But that ability to choose to save up some money. One of the least popular things that when I'm giving advice to other entrepreneurs and hopeful business owners is maybe it's not right now. You're going to have to save a little bit. The first thing I tell people is let's figure out how to work with the budget that you have. In the event that budget isn't going to work for no matter what reason, you're right. There tend not to be briefcases of money sitting on the ground. Sometimes there are a few, sometimes there's a grant, sometimes there's an opportunity. But a lot of times even those tend to reimburse you on the backside. It's not a pile of cash to start. So sometimes you may need to stop, look at your personal budget, look at what you have going on and figure out how to save up that bolus of cash so that then you can legitimately go to maybe friends and family, a bank, some other sources of funding to be able to round that out. So again, kudos for taking it. And then seeing the opportunity in that layoff. Like for you, that turned out to be an opportunity and turned out well for you. That's not an uncommon story that people figure out how to take that severance window and be able to move forward and be successful in that way. But last piece, as we talk about resources, I always want to talk about people's support network and their community of people that they had going, because as much as entrepreneurship feels like a lonely business, we're not alone and almost no one does it alone. In fact, I'll just be bold enough to say no one does it actually alone. So talk to me a little bit about your support network and who's helped you along the way.
I think, you hit on the alone is very real, right? So one of the things we did early on is lay out what are all of our fears, right? And that was one of the fears for me is that, I'm a pretty social guy, fairly extroverted, and I'm used to working in an office with a lot of people and having a lot of interactions. And I thought, if I quit, I'm just going to be in the garage by myself, right? And I'm going to go stir crazy, right? But the reality is that hasn't happened. I mean, we've got a team of 12 people right now. So certainly I have plenty of interaction on a regular basis. And now as we build our customer base too, there's further interactions. It's just a different set of people. But I just wanted to name that fear, right? Because there was a fear there that, you're going to be alone doing this by yourself. Now, that being said, when I decided to take the leap, I thought I had a good network, but I didn't. I had a professional network very much internal to the company that I was in, which is a fairly large company. And I had, a network of people that I'd gone to school with and stuff like that. But it turns out I didn't have maybe the network that I thought I did until that time came. And so I stepped out and first question was like, oh, okay, how do you actually found a business, right? So how do you register with the state and how do you get a website domain and how do you do this, that, and the other? And we had a close friend that had done this previously about 5 years previous. Or we have a close friend that had done this 5 years previous, and she was able to just walk us through those first couple of steps and get us going, which was really helpful. And then start to meet people through the various training, coaching that we've had along the way. And you start to build a network a little bit of other people in similar situations. and you build a new network and you just say, hey, I really need somebody to help set up a website, right? Or I need somebody to do graphic design. I've never done graphic design before. I don't really know anybody. So had to reach out, and it was really helpful to build kind of a second network along the way of people. And what I found is, one connection led to another connection. In fact, we would work with a local product development company and contracted an industrial designer to work on our van. And then when we would have these conversations, often he would say, oh, one of my friends does web design. He'd be great. And so we go with that guy, and he was great. And he'd be like, oh, another friend of mine does graphics. And after a while, it became kind of a joke that like any friend of his was an employee of ours. So it's kind of funny. But really, you don't do it alone. Even if, and this is a little bit, maybe humbling for me to say, like, as an engineer, you're always expected to always have all the answers, right? That's what engineers do. They understand physics, what's going to happen, what's always predicting the outcome. But the reality is you just don't know. Maybe I could do certain elements of this job, but there's no way that I have the capacity to do all of them to run this business. So, sometimes you need people for capacity to go do a job that maybe you could do, but to free you up to do other things. And sometimes you need somebody because you just have no idea. Like social media for me was a complete blind spot. I'm not a big Facebook or Instagram type person, but it's super critical for getting the word out. I knew at least that much, but so I had to reach out to somebody that really had a skill set that I just did not have whatsoever. So, it just, you just got to ask and put yourself out there and reach out to the network you do have. And then the universe responds with people by putting people in your path that are good fits. So I'm really actually happy the team that we built. And I'm also happy to say about halfway through this process, I said to my wife one day, I said, I was really afraid I was going to be alone, but my day's pretty full. I'm working with all these different people. And actually it turns out we built a team, we built another network, and it really was never really realized, which is pretty cool. So it really does take a village, and we got a really cool team that I'm really proud of. So I could probably talk on and on about that, but
Well, one of the hardest parts of launching a business is building a team around you. So you did a couple things that were key. You recognized that your network that you had existing wasn't going to be sufficient. It wasn't that it was incomplete. It just wasn't going to be sufficient. And you started working the connections you had and were willing to follow them wherever they go. It's often, for anyone watching on LinkedIn, it is the power of LinkedIn. It's not necessarily the people it's the people that they know that end up driving the majority of the connection activity. So do that as an entrepreneur. Get out there, talk to people, ask for what you need, talk about what you have, be a giver rather than a taker. And I think you're going to find that circle of opportunities shows up. So Brian, last question before we wrap up here. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to go with one after that too, but tell us about your brand. What do you want people to know about your business when they come and have an experience with you? This is commercial time. Go ahead.
So we're all about curiosity. When we thought about that, who do we want to be? Who are we as people? Who do we want this brand to be to reflect us? We did a lot of reflection and discussion and writing. And when you're in this getting outdoors camper space, everybody says adventure and exploration, to the point where they almost become cliche. And when we thought deeply about that, we said, excuse me, at the root of that is curiosity, right? It's curiosity about places. It's about people. It's about food. And really getting out there and experiencing those things in the real world. So I'm gonna grab a drink of water. Excuse me. So for us, it's that curiosity, feeding the curiosity, as well as connecting people in the real world to real world experiences. So that's really kind of at the core of our brand. And then when we say we want to deliver products then that help enable that curiosity, what do those products need to be? And we came up with 3 A's for our product identity, and that needs to be authentic, athletic, and affordable, right? So authentic to us means, premium materials, and that you're taking all senses into the experience as you kind of engage with the vehicle, right? So it needs to look good, it needs to feel good, it needs to smell good, and it needs to make you feel good whenever you're using it. Excuse me. Athletic or athleticism means delivering a lot of capabilities. So in the case of our camper van here, we talked about the 4 different modes and the fact that you can reconfigure it, and that it brings that extra capability. So really delivering on that. With some of our other products, athletic works a little bit better, but because it's an A, but there's really more capability on this one. And then the third A is really affordability. So while these are still fairly expensive vehicles, we wanted to be towards the low end of the spectrum. So we're trying to use the industry experience that we have to figure out ways to reduce part costs so we can keep the overall vehicle cost down. And the ways we do that are things like standardization and interchangeability. We do have some customization and options, but we kind of keep that complexity pretty small so that we can produce a vehicle that's at the low end of the price point of this market. And then what that does then is it allows us to sell in greater volume and more people get to experience the product. So that's kind of a couple layers of our brand, really. We're just, about encouraging that curiosity, engaging with the real world, and delivering just really great vehicles that people want to use and enjoy.
Awesome. If people want to get a hold of you and they want to learn more about your camper van and the amazing experience you're going to give them, how do they reach you?
So, the company name is Orion Motors. Orion, after the constellation, is one of the easier ones to identify in the night sky. But then we wanted to kind of, add to that. And so our website is Drive Orion, DriveOrion. And so putting that kind of action in front of it, it's getting out there, it's engaging, and it's experiencing with nature. So driveorion.com is the website, as well as our various social media channels.
Perfect. Hey, Brian, I really appreciate the time you were able to spend with us. I think if you've learned anything from Brian and the time that we've had together, that focus on perseverance, that willingness to shift his mindset and being flexible, knowing what his end goal was going to be, but didn't really care about the path and how he was going to be able to get there. There may be a camping and an off-roading sort of analogy there, but I'll leave it to people better than I to really tackle that one. And then finally, I would say seize that opportunity when you see it. When you feel that time is right, so many entrepreneurs have that they feel like they were called, or that this is it, this is that time. If you're feeling that moment, don't disregard it, look at it heavily and see if you can get into it. Well, again, I want to encourage you, anyone who's able to make it, Tuesday, October 26th, 8 a.m., do come and listen to these four founders' amazing stories. If you haven't heard Denise Thomas or Sharon Kevel or Chad Johnson or Jaime Nanez be able to speak, you're going to be inspired by where they've gotten to, where they are continuing to go, and some of the ways that they got there. So on the Bayou Restaurant, do join us live if you can. If you're not able to or not comfortable, do join us on Zoom or LinkedIn. Check out that QR code, bit.ly/4founders. That's bit.ly/4founders. You can sign up, get more information about that. I would be remiss if I didn't also tell you there's some other opportunities to continue getting together. We talked about the need to network. We talked about the need to build a successful group around you to support you. And that's why I founded Entrepreneur Encounters. It's that networking opportunity Wednesdays at 4:30 Central, where we get together as entrepreneurs to be able to share some of our struggles, maybe workshop some problems, put out a goal, have some accountability, and most of all, just meet other people that you haven't had a chance to encounter before. Every single episode, we've run this since very early in the pandemic in 2020. Every single week, we've had people get something out of the program. At least one entrepreneur has walked away saying, "That's awesome. I'm glad I picked that up." So do join us again. That's bit.ly/entrepreneur encounters, bit.ly/entrepreneur encounters, one word. I got some sponsors to help us out. Brian today mentioned some people. He's like, I know a guy. We've got some of those people I want to recommend. Andrew Feller Photography has done all our photos, both here and on our website. Buckethead Creative handles all our graphics. Charlie's Music Factory and Chris Crane does our music on the way out. And Milwaukee Web Design has helped us get our website and our social presence to the point where we're at today. So thank you to all of them. Again, episode 14, Brian Dondlinger, co-founder and CEO of Orion Motors, LLC. If you haven't had a chance to see his new vehicle, I'm sure you're going to see him around town here in the Milwaukee area more and more. Do look him up directly, driveorion.com. So again, I'm Brent Halfwasson. I'm an entrepreneur coach and a business catalyst. If I can help you grow your business and accelerate your profitability, do reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly, brent@halfwasson.com. So again, thank you. And we're going to ask Chris to go ahead and take us out.